Everyone's getting a 20% raise except you, my boss said smugly, leaning back in his leather chair. Your performance doesn't quite justify it. The air in the boardroom turned cold. I could see my breath if I tried. My teammates shifted in their seats, suddenly fascinated by the blank pages in their notebooks. 3 years of missed Thanksgivings, skipped anniversaries, and 3 a.m. status calls with our partners in Berlin written off with one arrogant sentence. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at him then, down at the quarterly report he was tapping with his silver Mont Blanc pen. The same report I had compiled data that clearly showed I generated 37% of our new revenue this year. I understand, I said calmly, gathering my folder. We'll revisit it in 6 months, he added, already looking past me, like I'd vanished. As I returned to my desk, my phone buzzed. It was Lars, our lead contact at Koenig Global, our German tech client. He was texting me about expanding their contract. It would double their annual spend. And the best part, my boss had no idea it was even happening yet. A quiet fire lit in my chest. Some lessons need words. Others require spectacle. And tomorrow's all-hands meeting, that would be the perfect theater. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand something. I'm not someone who seeks revenge. I don't believe in burning bridges for the thrill of it. But sometimes you have to draw a line, not just for yourself, but for everyone after you who might be too afraid to speak. My name is Jordan Avery. I'm 45 years old, and I'm the senior business strategist at a fintech firm in Atlanta. I joined this company in 2015, armed with 2 decades of experience and a deep drive to build something that mattered. My parents were teachers, firm believers that showing up early, working hard, and staying honest would open every door. But my boss, Damien, tested that belief. I'm quiet by nature. I'd rather run regression models than lead conference calls. But I've got grit. My grandmother called it steel in the bones. And that's what carried me through 70-hour weeks, tight deadlines, and an office culture that only seemed to promote noise over substance. When I joined, I respected Damien. But over time, I saw how he co-opted others' wins, especially mine, and how women were consistently talked over while men were handed credit with a smile. That was about to change. Promotions always seemed to go to those who mimicked Damien's sharp elbows and louder than necessary confidence, regardless of what they actually achieved. Quiet consistency never won the spotlight. It just kept the lights on. For the past 18 months, I'd been handling the Koenig Global account, our largest European client. No one else wanted it. Too many time zone headaches, too many early mornings with Berlin, too many late-night updates after their board met. But I leaned in. I picked up basic German read books on cross-border finance etiquette and slowly built a strong rapport with Lars and his team. What began as a small data analytics contract had grown into a full-scale strategic partnership. Every week, I emailed Damien detailed updates, metrics, feedback projections. Every week, silence. In leadership meetings, Damien would casually mention our progress with Koenig, as if he'd spoken to them personally. When Lars sent glowing feedback, Damien forwarded the email to the exec team with a smug caption, "Proof that our strategy is paying off." No mention of who actually implemented it. Still, I kept going. Not because of pride, but because I believed in the work and because I was raised to finish what I start. My parents didn't put in 35 years in public schools and budget grocery runs so I could crumble just because someone like Damien didn't know how to say thank you. The morning after the raise debacle, I arrived early. The office was quiet. Only Marcia was at her post, our longtime front desk admin, with her signature mug that read, "I see everything." And she did. "Tough meeting yesterday?" she asked, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter toward me. I hesitated. "I heard him bragging to Leo about how he handled your expectations," she added. I clenched the cup a little tighter. "Is that what he calls it?" Marcia adjusted her reading glasses and gave me a look. "I've been here 14 years, Jordan. Talented people come and go. The ones who stay, they learn how to survive the politics. I'm not here to play games," I replied. "I just want the work to speak for itself." She smirked. "And how's that working out?" I didn't answer. She leaned in. "By the way, Damien's showing your Koenig slides at the company meeting today. 15 of them. All about his vision." My stomach dropped. How do you know that I proofread everything he sends out? And not once does your name appear. I didn't feel angry. I felt calm. Cold, clear, and ready. What time did Lars say he'd be calling today? Marcia asked already. Sipping her second coffee of the morning, I glanced at my calendar. Around 10:30. He wants to discuss the contract expansion before Koenig's board meeting tonight. Marcia nodded, her eyes sharp. Interesting. The all hands kicks off at 10 sharp. We exchanged a knowing look. Without saying another word, she pushed back from her desk. I'd better make sure the speaker system in the conference room is working. She murmured, a faint smile playing at her lips. By 9:55 a.m., all 50 employees had begun filing into the main conference room. The mood was tense, but routine until you looked closely. I chose a seat along the wall instead of at the long table. I placed my phone screen up right next to my notepad. At the front, Damien stood flipping through his notes while the tech team wrestled with the projector. Leo, his ever-loyal deputy, walked around, passing out printed copies of the quarterly report, my report. Of course, the cover page didn't have my name, but the charts, the formatting, the language, all mine. I watched as colleagues flipped through the pages, their brows furrowing over data I had cleaned, structured, and forecasted over 2 straight weekends. At exactly 10 zeros, Damien cleared his throat. Let's get started. First, congratulations on another strong quarter. You'll see on page 4, our growth has exceeded expectations by 12%. He rolled on for 20 minutes, giving perfunctory shout-outs to various departments. Then he reached the international expansion segment. The next slide showed a German flag beside our company logo, and now Damien said, puffing up slightly, for the most exciting development of the quarter. As many of you know, I've been cultivating a strategic relationship with Koenig Global in Berlin. I felt my face heat up as a few coworkers glanced my way, then quickly down again. Through a patient, trust-based approach, Damien continued, we're positioned to significantly expand that partnership. His voice echoed my hours of research, my 4 a.m. calls, the months I spent learning German business etiquette. We expect to finalize a deal soon, potentially doubling current revenue. And then, like divine timing, my phone lit up. Lars Koenig. Perfect. I raised my hand slightly. Damien paused, jaw twitching. Yes, Jordan. Sorry to interrupt. Lars from Koenig is calling. Should I take it or call him back later? Silence blanketed the room. We're in a meeting, Damien said tightly. Of course, I replied calmly, reaching for my phone. I'll message him you're unavailable to discuss the contract expansion. His jaw clenched. He was doing the math. No, he said at last. Take it. Briefly. I answered the call and tapped the speaker button. Good morning, Lars. You're on speaker with our entire team during our company-wide meeting. If you felt the shift in power like I did, don't forget to subscribe so you're here when the next chapter unfolds. Trust me, the story's not over yet. Perfect timing, Lars said, his upbeat German accent carrying clearly through the room. I was hoping to share some good news with you first, but now everyone can hear it. I glanced at Damien. His expression was tight lips, pressed into a flat line. He hadn't expected this, certainly not a call that began with warmth toward me. Our board met early this morning, Lars continued, and we've decided to expand our partnership to $12 million annually, 3 times our current agreement. The room went dead silent. $12 million. It would be the largest contract in the company's history. That's incredible news, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the way my pulse jumped. We've been honored to support your growth. There's more, Lars added. As I mentioned in our private discussions last month, Koenig Global is launching a new international strategy unit based out of our Singapore office. My breath caught, but I stayed composed. Our board has officially approved our offer to you, Jordan, to lead that division. The package is $300,000 annually, plus full relocation and benefits. We believe your leadership and vision are exactly what we need. Damien's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the podium. I saw several coworkers look at him, then back at me, their expressions caught between confusion and awe. I'm honored, Lars, I said evenly. And this comes at a very interesting time. I hope that means you'll seriously consider it. he replied with a chuckle. Oh, and one last thing before I let you go, he added. We should mention that the acquisition will be finalized next week. The room stirred. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered sharply. Acquisition. I asked, though. I already had a strong suspicion. Yes, Koenig's purchase of your firm. Didn't your leadership team inform everyone? The paperwork is almost done. We're excited to restructure with your insight on who truly drives value. Shock rippled through the room. Damien's slides were still frozen behind him, but no one looked at the screen anymore. I cleared my throat. I believe this is news to many here. Ah, my apologies. Please call me later to discuss next steps, Lars said. Of course. And just like that, the call ended, leaving silence loud enough to echo. The call ended, leaving a vacuum of silence so complete it pressed on the walls of the conference room. Damien cleared his throat. Let's take a 15-minute break, he muttered, voice tight. We'll resume with the marketing update afterward. Chairs scraped the floor. Conversations buzzed immediately. I could feel the stares. The energy, shift, and invisible axis had tilted. Damien walked toward me, jaw clenched. My office, he hissed. I followed him down the corridor, every step echoing. People watched without trying to look like they were watching. Inside his office, he slammed the door shut and whirled around. What acquisition? What job offer? What the hell have you been discussing with them without clearance? I stayed calm. Lars contacted me directly last month. He mentioned Koenig's interest in acquiring a controlling stake. I forwarded you 3 emails. He blinked, and we discussed their international expansion plans during our strategy meeting 2 weeks ago. His face turned red. I don't recall that. I have the full thread, I said evenly, including your replies saying you'd handle it at the executive level. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This is moving too fast. We need to slow it down. Reassess. Renegotiate terms. The terms are generous, I replied. 30% above market valuation. I assumed you'd be thrilled. We can't just let them take over, he snapped, and we certainly can't have them restructuring leadership based on your opinions. I looked him in the eye. Yesterday, you told me my performance didn't justify a raise, even though I brought in nearly 40% of new business. I leaned forward slightly. Today, that same client offered me a job at triple my salary. So which assessment do you think carries more weight? He stared at me, and for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty on his face. Real, unguarded doubt. Look, he said, voice softening. Maybe I was a little hasty yesterday. We can revisit your compensation. He sat down behind his desk, folding his hands. How about a 25% raise? Effective? Immediately. For a second, I just looked at him. This man who had dismissed my value until it threatened his own position. He wasn't offering respect. He was offering desperation wrapped in a dollar sign. And he was about to find out that this wasn't about the raise anymore. I studied the man who had ignored my efforts for years, who once couldn't even remember the name of the client I built from scratch. Now, he was flailing, tossing around money he denied me just 24 hours earlier, like it was a bargaining chip. This isn't about the raise anymore, Damien. He straightened up, his voice tight. Then what do you want? A promotion. A better title. No, I said. I want recognition. I want respect. And those aren't things you can offer conveniently just because your back's against the wall. He leaned against his desk, trying to appear composed. You don't understand the pressure of running a company. Sometimes, tough calls have to be made. Save it. I interrupted, surprising even myself with the firmness in my tone. For 3 years, I've watched you take credit for other people's work, mine included. Let's not forget it was Daniel who built the forecasting model that saved our Pacific accounts. I stepped closer. And Maya. She created the dashboard you keep showcasing as a leadership-driven innovation. You didn't even know it existed until the day of the presentation. His eyes narrowed. That's how leadership works. Everything reflects the executive team. And now, that same leadership has led us into an acquisition because the new owners see through the facade, I said. They've asked me directly to provide input on the team, on who actually drives value around here. His posture shifted. The message landed. "You wouldn't tank your colleagues for personal revenge," he said, though his voice had lost its usual confidence. "I'd never hurt this team," I said. "But unlike you, I know who makes this place run. And I intend to make sure they're finally seen." I turned toward the door. "The meeting's resuming. Should we keep pretending everything's business as usual?" The rest of the company update was a performance in denial. Damien stood in front of the projector like a man waiting for a storm that had already hit. Questions about the acquisition flooded the room. He gave vague answers, sidestepping anything concrete. He never once looked in my direction. By lunchtime, the building buzzed with tension. And when I returned to my office, Marcia caught me near the break room. "Your desk has been popular," she murmured, tilting her head toward my door. Sure enough, there was a quiet line outside. People clutching folders, tablets, notes. The first was Daniel. He cleared his throat. "I just wanted to make sure you had a copy of the forecasting model notes, in case they're needed." He wasn't the last. After Daniel came Maya, then Jesse, and finally Pavel. Each one walked in with quiet urgency, offering documentation screenshots, development logs, anything to prove what they had done before it was erased under Damien's strategic vision. With every conversation, the pattern sharpened, talented professionals being systematically denied credit, their work repackaged under someone else's name. At exactly 3:00 p.m., my phone rang again. Lars was requesting a video call to go over transition planning. I booked the small conference room on the third floor far from Damien's office. On the screen, Lars appeared alongside two senior executives from Koenig Global. We exchanged brief greetings before Lars got to the point. "We value your firm's technical depth," he said. "But during our due diligence, some leadership patterns raised concerns." I nodded. "What kind of concerns?" "Credit concentration. Bottlenecks in decision-making. High turnover among top contributors," he replied. "Our internal research shows several high performers left over the past 2 years, citing lack of recognition. That's consistent with what I've seen," I told them. "We'd like you to prepare a talent assessment." Lars continued highlighting who's truly driving innovation and client results. That will guide our restructuring strategy. He paused. "Regardless of your decision about the Singapore offer, we trust your insight. You're the one we believe understands the real talent here." We spent the next hour reviewing integration timelines, communication protocols, and how to position the transition. When I left the conference room, I no longer felt like just another employee. I was someone with influence, someone who could protect the people who deserved it. As I passed the hallway near Damien's office, I spotted him with Leo and 2 other execs. Their hushed tones and furrowed brows told me everything damage control mode. They fell silent when I walked by. Moments after I sat down at my desk, the phone rang again. "Damien's assistant. He'd like to see you in the executive conference room." When I arrived, Damien was alone, seated at the head of the table with a folder in front of him. "Close the door," he said, not looking up. I did and remained standing. "I've been reviewing your file." He began flipping it open. "Your initial interview flagged hesitancy in group settings. Weak executive presence. That's a theme in several reviews." I almost laughed. The same reviews where I exceeded every single performance metric he didn't answer. "The truth is, Jordan," he said tightly, "you don't have the leadership instincts to guide a company through change." I stared at him. "Then why did Koenig just offer me the job you always wanted?" "They see quarterly wins," Damien said tightly, "not the day-to-day challenges you still struggle with." "Interesting perspective," I replied calmly. "So, what exactly did you call me in here to discuss?" He closed the folder and leaned forward, hands clasped like he was about to make a solemn vow. "I'm offering you a deal," he said. "If you support me through this transition back, my leadership, present my strategy in a favorable light to Koenig's acquisition team, I'll make it worth your while." I raised an eyebrow. "You'll get the senior director title you've been aiming for. Plus, the compensation package we discussed. It was so scripted, so painfully predictable, I almost felt insulted. And if I don't?" I asked. Damien's tone cooled. "Then I'll have to be honest in my exit briefings. About your questionable decisions, like the Brazil expansion delay. Or your reluctance during Koenig's cultural onboarding, blackmail dressed in a suit and tie. I didn't respond right away. Let him hear the silence and wonder what it meant. He went on. I've already drafted an alternative acquisition plan for the board one that retains our current executive structure and still delivers a strong valuation. You're assuming the board will choose your vision over Koenig's, I said. I founded this company, he snapped, voice rising. They trust my leadership. I studied him, this man who once commanded a room with ease, now bargaining to protect the illusion he'd built. There was something quietly pitiful about it. I'll consider it, I said, voice even. You'll have my answer tomorrow. The board meets at 11 right. Without another word, I left. Back at my desk, a message from Lars was waiting. Koenig wanted my talent assessment by tomorrow afternoon. Not a coincidence. They wanted to finalize their recommendations with my input. That evening, I stayed late, combing through 3 years of project archives, performance data, and team breakdowns. It wasn't subtle. Our best results came from teams Damien had barely touched, though he always presented them as personal triumphs. At 9, Marcia knocked lightly on my door. Her coat was on, but she lingered. "You're still here?" she asked. "Almost done," I replied, motioning to my laptop. She hesitated, then stepped inside. "There's something you should see." She slid a flash drive across my desk. Executive decks from the last 3 years. Initial drafts and final versions. Pay attention to what disappears. I blinked. "How did you—" "I format all his presentations," she said with a smirk. "Always kept copies, just in case." "Always keep backups," Marcia said with a wink. "You know, in case of technical issues." She gave me a look that spoke volumes. And let's just say around here, technical issues happen more often than they should. After she left, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and began reviewing the files. What I found wasn't surprising, but it was damning. The original presentation drafts credited individual contributors by name. The final versions, cleaned up, sanitized. Anything resembling team recognition was replaced by vague executive language, visionary leadership, departmental alignment, strategic execution. In several cases, entire slides showcasing employee achievements had been removed entirely. But the worst part, the track changes. Damien's user ID showed up again and again, removing names, inserting himself into summaries, and appending comments like, "Reframe this as executive-led strategy." On one slide regarding the Australian market algorithm, I found a note that read, "Remove Daniel's name. Attribute to leadership initiative." By the time I closed the last file, it was nearly midnight. But I wasn't tired. I was ready. The next morning, I arrived early. My inbox held another message from Damien, his original offer, now accompanied by more reminders about loyalty and opportunity. I didn't reply. Instead, I finalized 2 documents, my talent assessment for Koenig Global and a separate presentation for the board. At 10:30 sharp, board members began arriving. I nodded as they passed, each giving me a look that was equal parts curiosity and anticipation. They'd heard the rumors about the call, the offer, the acquisition. At 10:55, Damien stepped into the hallway as I approached. "Your decision?" he asked curtly. "I'll be presenting my own perspective," I said evenly. His eyes darkened. "You remember what we talked about? Actions have consequences." I looked him squarely in the eye. "They certainly do." The boardroom fell silent as we entered. 12 board members sat around the U-shaped table. 3 representatives from Koenig joined via video screen. I took a seat against the wall, not at the table. Not yet. Vivian, our board chair, called the meeting to order. "As you're aware, we've received an acquisition offer from Koenig Global. Today, we'll discuss its terms and our response." She gestured to Damien. As CEO, Damien will begin with his recommendation. He stood passing around packets. "Thank you, Vivian. While this proposal may seem appealing, I have serious concerns about the leadership restructuring." He spoke confidently for 30 minutes, defending the current structure, his client relationships, and the stability I've worked so hard to create. When he finished, Vivian turned to the board. "Questions?" One hand rose. "The acquisition terms cite issues with talent retention and credit concentration. Can you speak to that? Could you speak to those concerns?" one board member asked. Damien smiled tightly. Creative professionals often want more recognition than the structure of a functioning organization can always provide. Every company has to balance individual ambition with cohesive messaging. Our attrition is within industry norms, he added, waving the issue away with a practiced hand. Vivian turned toward the video screen. Lars, would you like to comment? Lars nodded. Our diligence raised consistent concerns about how contributions are recognized and rewarded within your organization. We believe sustained growth hinges on how well a company cultivates, not just retains its talent. That's why we specifically requested Ms. Avery's assessment. Suddenly, every eye in the room was on me. Jordan. Vivian said, "Would you care to share your perspective?" I stood and connected my laptop to the projector. "I've prepared a brief analysis," I began. "This focuses on attribution patterns, success drivers, and team structure over the last 3 years." Damien's confidence visibly faltered as my first slide appeared. Attribution disparity analysis, 2021-2024. For the next 20 minutes, I guided the room through hard data, side-by-side performance comparisons, project outcomes tied to team collaboration versus top-down directives, and specific examples of major initiatives that originated from mid-level contributors. Then I transitioned. "Finally," I said, clicking to the last section, "I want to address the issue of executive credit reassignment." The screen displayed a slide of before and after snapshots, original team slides from Marcia's flash drive next to their published versions. Names disappeared. Contributions generalized. In one, Daniel's algorithm had been relabeled as executive-led forecasting. These edits logged under Damien's credential span at least 17 projects. In over 3 years, I said. And they strongly correlate with rising turnover among top talent. The room was still. You could hear the HVAC hum. To be clear, our technical team is outstanding. But their continued engagement depends on leadership that truly values their voices. Vivian narrowed her eyes. "What would you recommend, Jordan?" "A flatter structure," I said. "Shared leadership, team-based performance metrics instead of executive-centric narratives, and above all, transparent attribution." On screen, Lars nodded. Vivian turned back to Damien. "Would you like to respond?" He stood slowly, visibly shaken. "These are cherry-picked examples," he said. "Leadership means making tough calls. Sometimes attribution has to be consolidated for strategic reasons. I've always acted in the company's best interest." "By taking credit for your employees' work?" one board member asked flatly. Damien's jaw tightened. "By presenting a unified vision to our clients." The room shifted as the tension thickened. The illusion was cracking. Throughout the final hour, Damien kept pushing the same line. His choices were just standard executive strategy. Even as data and testimony built around him, he clung to that narrative like it was armor. Eventually, Vivian called for a short break. As everyone stood to stretch or stepped into the hallway, Damien leaned toward me, his voice low, sharp. "You've made a serious mistake. Even if they remove me, your reputation is done." I met his eyes unwavering. "I'm not the one who betrayed this team." He didn't reply. When we reconvened, Vivian didn't waste time. "The board has reached a decision," she announced. "We will move forward with Koenig Global's acquisition offer, including all leadership restructuring provisions." She paused. "Effective immediately, Mr. Bennett will transition to an advisory role for the duration of integration. His long-term position will be determined at a later time." And just like that, it was done. The weeks that followed transformed everything. Koenig appointed an interim leadership council. I was asked to serve as director of strategic initiatives, a role I accepted in place of the Singapore offer. I didn't want to leave. Not now. Not when I could help rebuild what had been broken. Damien packed up his office on a quiet Friday afternoon. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't make eye contact. And no one stopped him. Without his looming presence, something changed. People stopped whispering in corners. They started stepping up, claiming their work, their voice, their ideas. By the time we gathered for the next quarterly review, the atmosphere was unrecognizable. Teams proudly presented their progress names front and center on every slide. Collaboration had replaced fear. The turnover rate, 0. After the meeting, Marcia stopped by my new office, not a corner suite, but a glass-walled room in the center of the floor. Big change, she said, smiling. People actually laugh in the break room now. It was overdue, I said. I just wish it hadn't taken all this to make it happen. Sometimes, she said, handing me an industry newsletter, the lesson only comes through consequence. There on a back page, a small blurb. Damien had accepted a strategic advisor role at a struggling startup. A steep fall. Later that night, I received an email from Lars. Our client satisfaction scores had hit record highs. Attached was a glowing review praising a culture of integrity, ownership, and shared credit. I forwarded it to the entire team with a short message. This belongs to all of us. Because real leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about making space for others to be heard. If this story hit close to home, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had your work dismissed or your voice silenced by someone in power? Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in my shoes or what you did do. Your story matters. Let's stand up for each other. And if you take one thing with you today, let it be this. Never let someone else define your worth. Speak up. Show up. And when the time comes, take your power back. And hey, if you're rooting for people like me, people who stay quiet until it really matters, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. There are more stories coming. Stories of strength, redemption, and the kind of justice that doesn't need to shout to make an impact.